So, welcome to the Purposes book with David G and David G. We are in chapter 11, A Vision for You, and we have 4 weeks left, including tonight. So, I think we're on week 91 of this journey through the 164 pages, which is pretty cool. So, we're gonna wrap up in the next 4 weeks. He's gonna complete our cycle, and then we're gonna start up a new approach Fridays at 3:30 Central. So, we'll keep you guys posted on that. David, do you want to set anything up before I start reading?
No, I think we're good because we're going to start like a different phase of this chapter. We're going to get to a story here. So we're good.
Your internet is a little wonky, so you might want to switch
All right,
over.
I just switched over to I just switched my hotspot, so maybe I should go back, huh?
Flip it back. We'll see how
This
it
is
goes.
okay. Okay. All right.
All right, I'll start reading. We'll see how this works out. So we're on page
Okay.
153, third paragraph. Here we go. In the chapter Working with Others, you gathered an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You'll want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here's a brief account. Brad, any words in there? No.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add to that little paragraph there is when we start out the chapter to working with others, which is on page 89. Yes, as we make our approach, and approach is a reference that we need to approach them, not wait for them to approach us. That's at least my rule of thumb that I like to use. How to aid in others to health. So, but at the same time, paragraph it says practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive one-on-one work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fails. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. We can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. So I got to keep that in mind. I'm helping myself at the same time by when I get out of myself by helping other people today too. So yes, I can aid to their health, but I'm also enlightening and enlarging my spiritual condition.
I'll
Oh, and
just.
I was gonna
Okay.
say one other thing there, just one thing in the middle of that paragraph. It talks about suppose now that through your several families have adopted this way of life, that's a spiritual life. That's what we get. We get to have a spiritual life directly from the work from the 12 steps of recovery. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was going to say for the next sort of couple of pages, including where this paragraph starts, we're going to be going back through a very familiar story that's already been covered in the book, and I suspect you guys are all familiar with at this point. So it's just a little bit more of a narrative. We may not have a lot of additional insights, so that we're not sort of rehashing stuff that we've already hashed a fair amount. Um, and just just quickly to add on to what David was saying. So this reference back to working with others, this idea of how we approach and aid others to help. Ton of content in there. If you guys were studying with us at that point, right? Too much to even try to itemize here. It is chock full. And the thing about the chapter two is it's very specific with direction. There's not a lot of theory. I mean, there are concepts in there, but it's a lot of very specifics, like do this, don't do that. There's some temporal references, do it at this point, etc. So, um, yeah, enough said about that. Continuing on. Years ago, in 1935, one of our number made a journey to a certain western city. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. He'd been successful had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feeling and controversy. Oh, sorry, Brett. I didn't set you to come off mute. Sorry about that. Try again, Brett. There you go.
Good. I have bogged down, which means delayed or stuck.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, so that Western city that we're talking about is Akron, Ohio, and Bill went there to. Bill would go out and investigate. Probably would be illegal today to do that. And go out and check out how people are operating their companies, and then report back and make a whole lot of money off of them. So the stock market people could buy stock in these companies. So that would probably be called insider trading today to some degree, but Bill was good at that. Bill was a investigator. Bill was a very bright man. So the name of that company was the National Rubber Machinery, and it was involved in a proxy fight, and that's why it fell apart on Bill. So that lawsuit, and when it got bogged down, the proceeding was shot through at the end of that paragraph. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feeling and controversy. So Bill took this very emotional here because Bill's head was always in the clouds. Bill was a millionaire at times, and then he burned it down, built it up, burned it down, built it up. David just brought up, we read Bill's story, and that's kind of that's how his life existed for a very long time. In early recovery too, and I'll point this out in the next paragraph even more. He's 6 months sober at this time. 6 months sober. So that's it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add there. Moving on in the story. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone, but whom? Nothing.
Yeah, if you consider this, Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't exist. All there is the Oxford group. He could have reached out to Abby, right? I suppose, or someone else in the group because he was attending those meetings. But so he realized he first of all he knew he was bitterly discouraged and he found himself in a strange place, meaning that he was alone. That was isolation. He was feeling loneliness, and I'll tell you what, as an alcoholic. When I first got sober, you could put my picture in the dictionary right along alone or lonely. My picture would have showed up, guaranteed. That's how I exactly felt. And Bill was reliving that moment because he didn't have a lot of success with helping other alcoholics through that process. But then he talks about here, still physically weak, right? I mean, the body is still recovering, and sober only 6 months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He was aware. He was not asleep dreaming. He was awake. He was absolutely aware. He wanted so much to talk to someone, but whom? And Bill again poses the question. Now let's take a look at what the answer is.
And what Bill had figured out at this point, as we learned in Bill's story and a little bit from the doctor's opinion, Bill got feedback from Dr. Silkworth and his wife. When he was going out he was trying to save all these alcoholics, right? And he was practically dragging some of them off of bar stools at some point, saying, "Oh, you got to have this spiritual experience." And he wasn't going about it the right way, but he kept trying. His motive was good to try to help. And the feedback he got from Lois and from Dr. Silkworth was, okay, so you're not successful in getting anybody else sober, but guess what? You're sober. You going out and talking, being in action is working. So what's Bill's inclination here when, life is happening? He's obviously not cured or recovered from all his bedevilments. Bad, scary business deal. And what happens? Those bedevilments start brewing up extra. And he's like, man, I better talk to somebody because I'm feeling uncertain and feeling like I might drink. All right. One dismal afternoon, he paced a hotel lobby wondering how his bill was to be paid. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby door opened into an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend. So what's Brett? Sorry.
She's good.
So Bill's at the turning point, right? I mean, we stood at the turning point. We know this because we've all heard it a billion times. We read how it works, and I got to do at least one bounce back so far here. Go back to my favorite paragraph in the whole book, page 25, bottom paragraph. Here's where Bill was, arguably. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we passed into the region from which there's no return through human aid, we had alternatives, right? And this is a little conceptual. This is a little figurative. For Bill, it was literal, right? He was in the pacing in the hotel lobby and he had two alternatives, at least that occurred to him at the time. One alternative, right? Go to the bar. And he knows what that's going to give him. The other is to look at the church directory. So what are those are the literal alternatives he's got, but what are the figurative ones? We have two alternatives. One was to go into the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And how do you perpetuate that? How do you keep that going? Pick up a drink, right? I pick up a drink, I'm off to the races because I'm going to trigger the allergy and break out in craving. I'm going to start blotting it out because I'm going to be in a bad way. And what's the other? To accept spiritual help. And what does it mean to accept spiritual help? To get aid from somebody else. But guess what is a part of that? Me getting into spiritual action. And so as Bill is contemplating the church directory and a spiritual sign physically, how he can engage in spirituality, how he can take some action to keep moving towards the spirit and away from the booze.
Yeah, so he's placed in this hotel lobby, which is the Mayflower Hotel, guys, and the address for that is 263 South Main Street in Akron, Ohio. So Bill's in a quandary. He doesn't even know how he's going to pay his hotel bill. I mean, this thing was got to come off for him, man. This deal that fell apart right in front of his very eyes. He's in bad shape. And then, so like David said, he's standing at the turning point. And a lot of times in those hotels back in the day, there was church directories. Church was a really big deal in bigger towns and smaller towns and rural areas too. So they would have a glass covered directory for local churches. But here's Bill's description of the door of the lobby into an attractive bar. Weren't they all? They're all attractive at some point or another. I mean, I started out at the highbrow ones and ended at the lowbrow ones. I guarantee you that. But he said he could see the gay crowd inside. So this crowd was having a great time, or at least that's the way he perceived it, right? This is the disease of perception. And in there, he would find companionship. So he thought, right? Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape up an acquaintance and would only have a lonely weekend. So he's already predicting how the outcome's going to be if he doesn't take a drink. And let's remember, alcohol is the solution. Unless the obsession's been removed, the malady's been removed in my life. So Bill isn't really working with anyone. He's got a relationship with a power greater than himself because Ebby introduced him to him. He said, get a power of your own understanding. So he has that going for him. But he has to make a decision. This is a vital decision to save his life here. It would have been way easier, but Bill is not asleep, dreaming he's awake. He's well aware that if he picks up a drink, like David pointed out, he's going to break out in craving. And when Bill drinks, he drinks like me. I don't know if he drinks like you or not, but once he starts, he cannot stop. That's all I got there.
And take a look, guys. Rob always puts so much cool stuff in the chat as we're going through this. There's a couple of articles and pictures he put in of what is that 263 South Main in Akron now. It's like the Mayflower Apartments. I hadn't even realized Rob put it in there. I was like looked on Google Map. Kind of cool.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. Of course, he couldn't drink, but why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? Sounds like a great idea, right? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now? Perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Again, it was the old insidious insanity. That first drink. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar.
I have insidious, which means gradual and subtle, and a shiver is trembling.
Mm. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so of course he couldn't drink. So he realizes if he takes a drink, he's going to break out in craving, and all bets are off after that. But why not sit hopefully at a table with a bottle of ginger ale before him? Has anyone else made that decision in your sobriety? Come on. I remember like 20 years ago, I went out with my sister and all her no, actually in sobriety I did
Oh,
this.
here we go.
Dude, I didn't take a drink, but I remember I was at a restaurant bar with my sister and all her friends that she grew up with. So she's a few years younger than me. And it was a whole day of eating and they were drinking. And my sister says, why don't you just get yourself a Virgin Mary? I go, that's a great idea. I ordered a Virgin Mary like 5 years sober. I mean, that's like crazy. Like, right. I mean, that's a reservation. That's just waiting for me to pick up another one. What I should have done is what Bill talked about. He wanted to wanted so much to talk to someone. I should have picked up the phone and called someone. I wouldn't have done that, or I should have drove myself. Whatever the case may be, but that's a very dangerous place to be. And yes, he only has 6 months of sobriety. Perhaps he can handle, say, 3 drinks, which is a lie. No more. That's a lie. Fear gripped him. So fear, evil and corroding thread ran through and through his existence. He's on thin ice. Again, it was that old insidious insanity. So let's go flop back to Jim's story on page 36 in the chapter more about alcoholism.
Good
You know,
call.
in this squiggly writing. It's in the second paragraph. So I'll let you guys catch up there while I'm going to read this in a second. And we're going to talk about that insidious insanity. So insanity in that first word says suddenly. So that's how insanity shows. It shows up suddenly. And the thought crossed Jim's mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my mouth, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. That's a lie. That's delusional. I ordered a whiskey and poured it in the milk. So sanity comes vaguely, insanity comes suddenly. So Bill didn't, so the insanity or the sanity did come vaguely for Bill. It showed up in his life. Thank goodness for that. But the insanity came suddenly at first for Bill. And then it said back to in Jim's story, I vaguely sensed that I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured I was taking whiskey on a full stomach. That's insanity. That is just, and plus it's sickening to put that whiskey in milk. That's yucky. Why would you do that? But back to our text here. It says, with a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Is it odd or is it God? I mean, how did he have the power to do that? On my own power, I pick up a drink. I'm not working with anyone. There's no big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have anybody's phone number. I don't have any contact. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, that is a power greater than myself. And he showed up in my life many, 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 many times like that. Not necessarily because of a drink or a drug, but in other situations in my life where I needed God badly, desperately. But he could still, in the back of his mind, as he's walking to the church directory, he hears in his mind the music and the gay chatter still floating to him from the bar. So it's still tickling him, still like saying, "Come on back here, buddy. I got you over here. You can have those 3, maybe that ginger ale that you so wanted." But so the fear that showed up, he took the step of courage and realized, and then after he took the courage, we'll find out that he makes a phone call. And now he has faith that this will work if he reaches out and helps someone else or asks for help.
As I read this and listen to David talk about it, look at how Bill wrote this, and I'm sure this is exactly how he's damn close to how he's experiencing it. It's almost like he's got the devil and the angel on his shoulders. The pendulum is swinging because look at this. Of course, he couldn't drink. He's on the right side there. But why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale, right? So he's like, oh, can't drink, but maybe he starts swinging back the other way. And he's like, after all, it's over 6 months. So then he goes even further to the left. The left is the sinister side. Maybe I could have 3 drinks, no more, right? So he's like, he starts at this hard place and then he's easing back and then it's a full pendulum swing all in the wrong direction. But then what happens? comes back all the way the other direction. Fear, realizes he's on thin ice, right? Which is a metaphor for, I'm going to crash through into the icy water and I'm going to die, right? But he realizes that first drink, right? This is what he got out of his study with working with Dr. Silkworth, not his study with, but treatment with, right? So he passed over, shiver from the fear, turns away, walks down the lobby to the church directory. But even as he's going back, when the pendulum is swung back, it's still eking back because he still hears the people laughing and having fun and the music coming out of the bar. He's not, guys, he's not skipping down to the church directory. He's trudging down to it, and like the devil's still calling him, like, Bill, come back. You're gonna have 3 drinks. Then we'll switch to ginger ale. We're having a good time, right? How many of us have had this experience? 100%, right? All those times we tried to not do it. So as he's on his way back, I'm envisioning how he's writing this next paragraph. Think about this, guys. So he's walking back and he's still feeling the pull to the bar, right? The pull to the dark side. What about his responsibilities? His family and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well. Ah, yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many such in this town. He'd phone a clergyman. His sanity returned, and he thanked God. Selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into a booth and lifted the receiver. Brett, anything? Everybody here is older, except, well, Ashton's pretty young, and I don't know who else, if we got any other. Everybody else here is a gray hair. We remember payphones. You'd go into this booth. It was like this box, and you'd pull the door closed, and then you'd put change in, and you had like a dial, right? Before we even had buttons. The payphone, right? So, but before this, so, again, think about the story. So he was pulled himself out. He didn't have a spiritual experience. He just had this, man, this is a really bad idea. He had some clarity, and he's trudging back towards the church directory. But as he's walking back is how I read this next paragraph, because he's like, God, what about my responsibilities? He's like, like he wants to keep going back to the bar. But then he's like, his family and the men, he's like, wait a minute. Oh, those other alcoholics. So now he's actually having a little bit more clarity here, right? And then he has a breakthrough, which I got to expect is God be little working part of his mind, to the extent that Bill has begun to recover and is somewhat recovered. God is taking him back to the idea that Bill had when he was in Towns Hospital, which is unbelievable that he had this thought early, laying in his hospital bed convalescing, thinking about all the alcoholics out there who could use his help. Maybe David will take us back there. So he's trudging, and all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, I forgot my calling. I forgot why I was chosen. I forgot I need to help all these alcoholics. So his sanity returned. He had a second step experience, right? Which is what that second step is about, the restoration of sanity in terms of my judgment, my discernment about what would happen if I picked up a drink. His sanity was returned in the moment. So what did he do? He thanked God. You bet your bippy he thanked God, because that wasn't on his power, right? No power, no choice, no control, as David tells us every week. He had done enough at this point. He was recovered enough that God was camping out in this back right quadrant of the brain where I believe God lives once I let him move into that place. He thanked God and then selected a church at random from the directory, stepped into this magical phone booth and lifted the receiver. And how about selected a church at random? Now, I don't know if that's really true. I think there's some things in the book here. I'll have to look that up, and we got the writing the big book, giant thing, and see if that's true. But it doesn't matter. Never let the facts get in the way of a good story, right? And the good story is ran his finger down a list and said, I'm going to call this one. And then, of course, we know what's going to happen from this random choice.
Yeah. So here, I want to really emphasize what he's talking about here in the beginning of this paragraph. But what about the responsibilities of family and men who would die because they would not know how to get well. Yes, those other alcoholics. And as David pointed out, in early convalescence, a couple days sober, he's asking Dr. Silkworth, can I go talk to other alcoholics in Towns Hospital?
Mm.
Like, that is not my first thought at 2 or 3 days sober. I'm still thinking about me. But Bill had that barn burning experience in Towns Hospital, and Silkworth said, dude, I don't know what you got, but just hang on to it because it's amazing. And Bill, this is Bill's thinking. He's thinking about how to get out himself. And to take that a little step further, even, I'm think about the responsibilities we have as sober members of alcoholics, not just so much as going to work and bringing home with a paycheck, but actually learning how to practice these principles in all our affairs. So we start treating people the way they deserve to be treated. Like, I actually, when I started really applying the 12 step and all the steps in my life, my relationships, especially the one with God, because that's the most important one, all the other relationships started getting better. And I'm talking about like having a great, loving, caring, thoughtful, put my wife's common welfare before my own all the time. My children, my neighbors, my family, and everybody else, and strangers and customers and everybody else. It's like getting out of myself. There's a lot of people really counting on me to stay sober. Like a lot of people. And that to me is I'm so full of gratitude that God did for me what I could not do for myself. But yes, indeed, I am so responsible for the action that's outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But the thing is, it's like, think about that. It's like people that are, and I was a chronic relapser from like 91 until when I came in 99, in and out. And I never, because I had no power, no choice to control, as David said, but I didn't understand the nature of this illness. I didn't know the three folds of the illness because no one explained it to me. But once I grasped that, once I understand what my relationship with alcohol and cocaine was, then I understood that I could get help. And it had to be and it's not a self-help program. So my responsibilities became that God came first, my sobriety came second, my wife came third, kids fourth, and job fifth, and those kind of things. But then I was able to be a responsible member of AA and CA. And I take great pride in that, like really great pride in that thing. I don't take credit for it. I just take great pride in it. And then it says, skip a little bit down. There must be many such in this town. So Bill's a visionary, right? Bill had that vision in Towns Hospital. He's still having it in this town. He knows there's alcoholics walking around all over the place. Then he phoned this clergyman. That clergyman's name was William Tunks. And the church that he was a clergyman for was St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Akron, Ohio. When he reached out to someone else, what happened? Just like in our 10th step, when we asked God at once to remove this, then we discussed this with someone immediately, sanity returns. That's what I'm looking for, because insanity was vague, or sanity was vague, and insanity was suddenly. Now my sanity returns. That's the practice of the 10th step. And then it says, the sanity return. And what did he do? This is so important, guys. Please take note of this because I don't do this enough. Then he thanked God. I'm always asking God for things, but I don't say thank you. And I had a sponsor that was always bringing that up to me all the time. Is you think it would be embedded in my brain? I'm better at it than I have been in the past, but I'm still not that great about it. Then to finish up that paragraph, he says, selecting the church at random. And again, I don't know, whatever. From the director, he stepped into the booth and he lifted the receiver. Courage. Fear, courage. Now he's going to have faith that when I reach out to someone else, I don't ever have to pick up a drink ever again. I can have permanent sobriety. This is a miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, starting right there with a solo member about to reach out to the second member of Alcoholics Anonymous very shortly. Is it odd, as Joe and Charlie said, or is it God?
So if you're one of David's sponsees, like Ash or RJ will tell you, you go to David with just about anything, first thing he's going to say is, where's God in this? Right? Right? So maybe you can add to your repertoire, David. Did you thank God? Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yes.
carry that with me. That's nice,
Yep.
huh?
Yes.
Okay, top of 155, moving on. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. Great word. It was the usual situation. Home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damaged. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic. And then there's a footnote. The footnote is this refers to Bill's first visit with Dr. Bob. These men later became co founders of AA. Bill's story opens the text of this book. Dr. Bob's heads the story section.
I have nadir means the lowest, despair, hopelessness, and his standing was damaged. That's his reputation. And that's it.
Thank you, Brett. So again, the clergyman is Walter Tunks, and he was one of the leading members of the Oxford Group in Akron, Ohio. So Bill's familiar with the Oxford Group because Ebby introduced him to it. And back in the day, before Bill got sober, he used to show up at those Oxford Group meetings drunk once in a while. So they didn't really like him necessarily. And he broke away from that later on, just because alcoholics, they wanted different people to attend the Oxford Group, not necessarily alcoholics. But anyways, and thank God Bill did this. So led him presently to a certain resident of the town. So as David pointed out, is Dr. Bob. And okay, so what did Dr. Bob know about alcoholism? Nothing. Nothing. He understood he's a very religious man. And if Bill would have went head to head with Dr. Bob about the Bible, Bob would have buried him. Totally buried him. Bob was very religious. He knew what the solution was, but he didn't know what the problem was. He didn't know that he suffered from a threefold illness. Bill, because David pointed this out earlier, because of the counsel of Dr. Silkworth and the counsel of his wife Lois, they pointed out to Bill, don't come with them with the religious facts. Go to him with the problem and tell them what you suffered from too and how you recovered. And this is why this worked, because he was armed with the facts about himself, about this illness. And when he introduced this to Bob, it was great news for Bob, because he never understood that once he put a drink in his body, that he had this abnormal reaction to it, this allergy that he broke out in, and that he didn't know when he stopped that this obsession with his permission, without his consent, God bless you, Scott, and and the malady which drove the whole thing. But Bob knew all about prayer. He knew all about a relationship with God. So you got to have both. Just like it talks about on page 17. Got to know problem. I got to know solution. When I know problem and solution, then I get to the promise of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is I can have permanent sobriety in relationship with the power greater than myself.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not going to add anything to that. When our friend, so Bill, related his experience, the man, Dr. Bob, agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary. But the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? He would do anything, he said, but that.
I have plight, which is a difficult or unfortunate situation.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, so again, I as I ended that last paragraph, Bill shared his experience with what his relationship with alcohol was, and Bob identified with it. And as we go on here, Dr. Bob starts to admit to his innermost self, conceding his innermost self, that he could not stop drinking for long, that he knew that a spiritual experience is what he needed to concede to, And it was absolutely necessary. Necessary is another word for must. We find that there's 152 or more in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or synonyms of must. Necessary is one of them. But the price seemed high upon the basics suggested. Here's why he thought this. This is Dr. Bob's perception of it. Now, again, this is the disease of perception. So let's follow the paragraph here. He told how he lived in constant worry, right? Think about it, about those who might find out about his alcoholism. Okay, everybody knew about Dr. Bob's alcoholism. Let's not make any mistakes or bones about this thing. Guaranteed. His business was failing. Dr. Bob was a proctologist. He had giant hands. I don't know why you would want a proctologist with giant hands, but he had giant hands, and he would have to take goofballs just or a couple of drinks just to even do surgery on people. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. So he thought in the back of his mind that he was hiding it sometimes. This is a lie. Everybody knew I was an alcoholic and drug addict. Everybody but me. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business? So this is him rationalizing why he shouldn't go any further, going any lengths, only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight. If I do not concede in my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic, meaning that I understand the three folds of this illness, I am not going to get better. I am not going to do step 2. Why would I? Come to believe that there's a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. I'm not going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, and I'm certainly not going to do one of those terrible, as they bring up in meetings, which they should stop doing, talking about the 4th step as some kind of a punishment, because it's not. As David always says, it's a celebration to freedom. So hold on, ring doorbell. I'm not answering that. Okay, so it says foolishly admitting to his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood. So he's worried about his patients. He's worried about the doctors and the other things. Okay, I get that. But here's the problem. The last sentence here. He would do anything, he said, but that is a reservation. That is a reservation, and he is in deep, deep trouble if he can't do that. If he can't concede, he doesn't need to concede to everybody else. He just needs to concede to his innermost self. He's taking this way out of context, blowing this way out of proportion. None of this is necessary. Minute to Bill, minute to himself, minute to God, and everything will take care of itself. And as the story reads, he has no problem going out and making amends pretty soon. You'll see quickly.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple of little things here. So as David talked about here, what was potent about so many people had tried to help Dr. Bob before, and Joe and Charlie talk about this, that Dr. Bob believed in spirituality. He had a system of faith through religion. He was going to the Oxford group. He liked the Oxford group. He couldn't absorb what they were talking about, their tenets and their absolutes and things, to get to the spiritual experience. So, what impressed Bob with Bill is that Bill came in and talked to him about his drinking, and Bob was blown away. And remember, Dr. Bob was a doctor, as David talked about. He's a medical doctor, and he had never considered, presumably, that this was a real illness that he had. He probably just thought he was a bad guy, that he had poor self-control, right? Bill educated him. And so then Bob, I think in the moment, as he heard Bill talk about the illness and his experiences with spirituality in the Oxford group, realized and conceded, yeah, I'm going to need a spiritual experience. That's the only thing that's going to help me. But the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. What is the price? Well, Bill tells us what the price of recovery in a spiritual experience is on page 14. Here's the price to pay. Destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us. That's a heavy price. So I had an anniversary recently, 21 years. And whenever back on the 21st, right? I think I would have announced it last week, but I was away, and the amazing Kathy sat in for me. Thank you, Kathy. So 21 years in, every time I read these things, I'm like, that's not a steep price. I'll turn it over. I'll give everything to God, because God saved my life and gives me all this direction. But man, oh man, at the beginning, that price is so steep. And that's what Bob was thinking about here. I just don't know. Sure, I need a spiritual experience, but am I really willing to give everything over? Am I really willing to begin a life where I am not the center of everything? That's a tough putt for an alcoholic or an addict. I only knew how to live with everybody and everything rotating around me, revolving around me. I had no other concept that I could live another way, right? So then, David talked about his worries with the work. We'll skip over that stuff. The familiar alcoholic obsession. Ooh, I can feel that in my gut just reading it. And he's bargaining. He doesn't want to screw up his business. He doesn't want to hurt the people, his patients. He'd do anything he said but that. Setting limits, right? He's not willing to pay the price, at least at the end of this paragraph.
So, this is what I'll tell you real quick though.
Right, David?
This new news
We hear some audio coming through.
Hold on. All right. Now we're good. Okay.
Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery.
I have intrigued, which is curious.
Thanks,
Thank
Brett.
you, Brad. Yeah, so this roaring bender, so that Bob went on, it was some kind of pre-convention thing that he went to. I don't really have all the details of it. I used to have notes on it, and they're not in this book anyways. So I mean, he there's no such thing as just he's not a teetotaler. He's not having a couple drinks and stopping abruptly. That's not how he drank, So Dr. Bob is we're on a roaring bender, of course. And then it says he saw that he would have to is a must, his problem squarely, that God might give him mastery. The only way I'm aware of how to do that again is to concede to my innermost self and then get busy and do this work as if my ass was on fire, and it is. So when I do that, those are steps 1 and 2. First of all, I'm conceding my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic, that my life is unmanageable, and then came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity when the sanity takes place in step 10. So Dr. Bob is going to have this experience, and thank God that he does. And he needed that last drink. I needed every drink I drank to get me where I'm at today.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I've told this story many times as we've been going through this. I tell it a lot in meetings and stuff. My experience, and I say this of hope, I went to my first meeting and I've not drank or drugged since, right? Over 21 years now. That was my experience. I was done when I came in, and that's not to suggest that I'm better than anybody else. It was just my journey. My wife, she's not in the other room like normal. She's out of town right now. She's got 18 years coming up on 19. And her first year was rough. Bunch of relapses, right? She needed a few more drinks after her first meeting. Whereas David told you he needed another, 6 or 8 years of drinking before he was ready, right? Everybody's got their own path. Got to get every last drink and try every other way to stop drinking and drugging. Go ahead, try those other things, because we're here, and this system, this program, this design for living always works. It always works. So please try everything else. If you can find an easier, softer way, God bless. But we'll be here. If you do this thing thoroughly and honestly, you'll have a spiritual experience and your life will be amazing. Top of 156. One morning so this is Dr. Bob, took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he'd hurt. He trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business. Nothing, Brett? Okay. So what we know about, and David was talking about this, what precipitated the bender, Dr. Bob had to go on this convention. He wasn't spiritually fit rather. You know, he had begun a recovery because just like Jim the car salesman. But at this point, Bob had failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life. All right. We've seen this a lot. Boy, if you've been around in meetings, 1, 2, 3, drink. 1, 2, 3, sex. 1, 2, 3, because as soon as we get into some real action, we find out how desperate and how broken somebody really is. You know? So Bob wasn't in great shape, and he had, the story of this day, the lore, right? The history of the lore is that he was coming off this bender. He had to do surgery. He had to give him, Bill and Ann, Bob's wife, had to give him a beer or two to calm his nerves so he could get through this surgery. Right? But here's the problem. He didn't come back that night after the surgery, after the day at work. So Bill and Ann are like, oh man, we blew it. We thought we were just giving him a little something to get over the jitters and he was going to be gone. And they're like, well, he must be off, drinking his tail off. And that's not what had happened. What had happened is what Bob was talking about here. He went around and told his peers, his colleagues, his patients, look, I have this drinking problem, to which David pointed out everybody was crystal clear that he had a problem. And then he did the thing that he had never done before, right? Was that he really began to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life, not only by admitting to people, right, about his problem, but he made his rounds of people he'd hurt. He went out and did 9-step amends. We didn't know they were called 9-step amends then, but there was this concept in the Oxford group of restitution, right? That was one of the 6 tenets, right? You went out and you made it right. I mean, Bill lifted the idea of steps 8 and 9 directly from the Oxford group around this, and thank God that he did. Like, one of the most important things that I can do as a recovered alcoholic. Go out and make this stuff right. Go look people in the eye.
We're in to 3 days.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add, David. I think that was good. Real good, thanks.
You were freaking lucky. I'm telling you right now.
We keep getting some background audio from you. I don't know what's going on. All right, we'll see if it happens again.
There we go. Okay.
Switch your audio or something. Okay, very good. 156,
Yes.
paragraph 2. At midnight, he came home exhausted, but very happy. He has not had a drink since. That was June 10th, 1935, I think. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community. And the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4.
So briefly here, he got home, like David pointed out, they're worried to death about him because he drank that morning before surgery. But he had to change of heart, right? From one page to the next. He's like, I don't want to tell anybody about this. Something changed. Why? Because everything needs to change internally. And he went out and made these amends to people. He spent all day long making amends to people. So he has not had a drink since. So what is that called? That's called permanent sobriety. That's what we can have. None of this one day at a time crap that sometimes you hear in meetings. No, stop that stuff. And he's also here's purpose. Here's usefulness. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4. It took him 4 years. It's a timeline for Bob. Maybe it is for you. I don't know. I clear up the records in my past pretty quickly. But the bottom line is here, I'm not looking over my shoulder any longer. That's what the 9th step relieves you of.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to add that, so we're dated here. We've got a timing reference to June 10th, 1935. Dr. Bob died in 1950, right? 15
Mhm.
years. And it is reported that he worked with 5,000 alcoholics over those 15 years. I had to double check the math here because every time I do this, it seems unreal. So it's 333 alcoholics he worked with a year. And let's assume when they say work with is took them through the steps. Probably wasn't actively sponsoring 333 people in the way that we talk about sponsoring today. Because, right, that concept of sponsoring really has evolved over time. But 333 people a year for 15 years, he averaged getting through the steps. Seems like a lot. It's a person a day. But just remember, we have slowed things way down, getting people through the steps, and that is not a good thing. Back then, this was efficient, right? And it goes back again, going back to page 14. What had occurred to Bill as he was laying in the hospital? Page 14, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll read it to you guys. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. So he knows he needs to go be of service. But then how about this? Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. So Dr. Bob and everybody early on was about this perpetuating, I'm going to get you to God fast, and then you're going to turn your ass around quickly and start helping alcoholics. Let's go back one more bounce. If I get it right, page 129. Right, in the family afterwards, during those first days of convalescence, right? It is well to let him go as far as he likes in helping other alcoholics during those first days of convalescence. This will do more to ensure sobriety than anything else. What these guys and gals were doing, people, is quickly getting alcoholics through the steps. And then as they were getting better, as they're convalescing, as they were still recovering, they weren't recovered, they're saying, get out there and take people through the steps, right? And that's what David and I try to do now. You know, sometimes is it 30 days? Yeah. Sometimes is it 3 months? Yeah. I don't think we've not perfected, you know, and some people struggle, got all that stuff. But I can tell you right now, we're doing like a Sunday morning deal with Levi and about a dozen other guys. We're going through taking the steps, all 12 steps in 12 weeks. And everyone there has already taken the steps or most of the steps. The real point of it that my sponsee Daniel, who's a part of it, brings up every week is this is how you guys get armed to go out and then take other people through the steps. It's all about solution-based sponsorship, right? That's how Dr. Bob was able to take a person a day. He's quickly, we're getting through the steps, 1 to 2 days. And then guess what? You're off to the races. Were they all experts? No. Are David and I experts? Hell no. But what we've got is we got the book, we got some notes, we got a little outline, and we're just doing it. Right? And you guys should too. And if you haven't seen it before, go to purposeofthisbook.com, scroll all the way down. There's a taking the steps outline. We call it the greatest hits of the 12 steps. It's how you quickly get somebody through to get them to God. Go swiftly through that. Move. Get them to God before they drink or drug again. And then start over on the side and go line by line, word by word, or have them join an intense study like this, or Howard's or Page, all these Terry, all these amazing speakers, right? Please supplement, because we can't cover every concept on route to getting somebody sober. We just don't have time. Howard, we love when he talks about this. There's a window of opportunity to get somebody to God, and that window can slam shut. All right.
And a little bit of spoiler alert too, just so you know. So June 6th, we'll be back live again, but we'll be on Friday afternoons at 3:30 in the afternoon. And what are we going to start with? 12 steps in 12 weeks. So we're going to do that format that David just talked about. So we'll go through it 55 minutes on the first step, and then the same with every other step afterwards. So
3:30 Central Time.
3:30 Central Time. Yeah, very good. Well put. So that's it.
Okay. We get 3 minutes here. Okay, well, we'll read this and we'll get a circle back.
Okay.
So moving on. But life was not easy for the two friends. Plenty of difficulties presented themselves. Both saw that they must keep spiritually active. One day, they called up the head nurse of a local hospital. They explained their need and inquired if she had a first-class alcoholic prospect.
So real briefly here, so they called up in Akron City Hospital, Mrs. Hall, that was the nurse that day. And when she heard from Bob, she's like, "Yeah, I know a real alcoholic. It's you, Dr. Bob." So it's like, but the Bob, he was already sober. Here's the only sentence I want to point out in that whole paragraph, because this is like really cool. Both saw they must. So again, they're not asleep dreaming, they're awake. And it's so important to be awake to this stuff. Both saw that they must, again, circle the word must, keep spiritually active. That is such a key. Sponsoring people, taking your triangle, well balanced, recovery, unity, and service. Like always cognizant of this. Always. Prayer in the morning, meditation, all the things that the book outlines for us to do to stay spiritually fit.
Let's just wrap there. I know we're 2 minutes before the hour,
Okay,
but I
cool.
think we're there, and we'll circle back on that next week.
Okay, very good.